One unexpected side effect of wearing a face mask, it can be hard to read facial expressions. Hi there, everyone. It's Jeff, and thanks for joining us for another Plain English lesson. I do sincerely appreciate that you choose to spend a part of your week listening to me in English. I think that's really great. JR is the producer, and he has posted the full lesson online at plainenglish.com/339. Coming up today, face masks are essential for public health during these times of coronavirus, but they can make communication difficult, and not just because it's hard to hear someone talking with a mask on. They block our facial expressions. So, on today's lesson, we'll talk about how we communicate with our faces and how we can compensate for having half our faces covered up. The expression is get away with, and JR has a song of the week. Wearing cloth or paper face masks is now the norm in dozens of countries around the world. It's essential to stop the spread of the coronavirus. For many of us, and I'll count myself in that, it's our first time wearing a protective face mask in public. The physical sensation of wearing a mask was strange at first, but most people can get used to that in just a few weeks. The harder adjustment, though, is interpersonal relationships. Wearing a mask can make it hard to connect with other people, colleagues, good friends, and even strangers. A mask presents two principal barriers to communication. First, it's harder to understand someone's voice clearly. And second, it's much more difficult to read facial expressions. Voices come out muffled, so speakers strain to be heard and listeners strain to understand. That usually means that speakers talk louder than normal, and their words lose some of the intonation that conveys meaning. Speech is full of meaning. The most direct form of meaning comes through words, but people communicate emotions through intonation too. Intonation can turn a genuine sentence sarcastic. It can add empathy or surprise. It can warn another person to be careful. In short, intonation can increase the power of our words. The trouble is, it's harder to add the right emotion to your voice when you're speaking loudly. Just try expressing empathy or understanding at a high volume. It's almost impossible. Individuals with hearing problems read lips and facial expressions more than others. About 5% of the world's population suffers from hearing loss. Reading lips and facial expressions also helps when understanding conversation in a second language. Even more than our voices, our faces tell a rich story. Scientists say that humans are the only animals that rely heavily on facial expressions to communicate. In fact, people place more reliance on what they see rather than what they hear. One study found that when there's a difference in meaning between the words that are spoken and the facial expressions of the speaker, people believe the facial expressions and not the words. Facial expressions are harder to fake. Take your smile, for example. I don't know about you, but I cannot fake a smile. I've given up trying. It just doesn't look good. If you catch me smiling, then you know the emotion is real. And the emotion behind a smile isn't just happiness. Studies have shown that there are 19 different types of smiles. A smile is most often associated with happiness, but only 6 of the 19 types of smiles convey forms of happiness. Others convey fear, embarrassment, pain, skepticism, disbelief, and other emotions. But face masks obscure so much of this communication, and they can have detrimental side effects. Effectively reading a smile or other facial expression helps humans know whom to trust. It stands to reason, then, that if we can't read facial expressions, it's harder to build trust with strangers. Superficial or transactional interactions are probably unaffected. Being masked as you shop for groceries or get a haircut is inconvenient, but probably doesn't have much effect on the outcome. However, other interactions are more important. For example, a 2013 study sought to measure whether patients perceived doctors differently if those doctors wore protective face masks when speaking. The result? Patients had less trust in doctors that wore face masks. That's because sincerity, trustworthiness, and good intentions are communicated non-verbally. So, if we know that face masks are blocking more than just our germs, is there anything we can do to compensate for this barrier to communication? Here are a few tips for communicating while wearing a mask. Some of these, by the way, come from women who wear face coverings in public for religious reasons. They're already a step ahead of the rest of us. First, pay close attention to your voice. Make sure you're speaking loud enough and try to accentuate the words you want to emphasize even more than you would normally do. It can sometimes feel uncomfortable to purposely speak with more vocal inflection than you're used to, but you can probably get away with much more vocal inflection than you think you can. Next, think about when you're not talking. A conversation is fluid when everyone knows when they can talk. Believe it or not, you often take your clue to jump into a conversation from the other person's lips. If your conversation partner can't read your lips, he or she won't know when it's okay to talk. So you can pause more often to give the other person permission to take a turn in the conversation. You can also use gestures and body language more than normal. You can give an animated wave, a thumbs up, a raised eyebrow, an outstretched hand. Raise your eyebrows and open your eyes wide to communicate a smile. In a business or more formal setting, be more explicit with your words. Don't assume the other person knows when you're being sarcastic or when you're making a joke. I know jokes aren't as funny when you have to over-explain them, but it's better to over-communicate with words than to be misunderstood. I'll tell you why I wrote about this. I was at the gym the other day. The gym and the grocery store are the only two places I go. And on my way out, I said thank you to the people at the front desk. Now, the words thank you by themselves, just the words, are almost meaningless because they're so common. People say thank you when they don't mean it, or because they feel they have to say it. But I was being genuine and smiling beneath my mask, and I realized that nobody was there to see that smile. So I started saying thank you and waving, which is not something I would ever do pre-mask. And that's how I got to thinking about this topic. My smile was getting lost. Today's expression is a phrasal verb, to get away with something. The most common way to use this is when you do something bad and you escape punishment. To get away with murder means you murder somebody and you never get caught. You never face punishment. You get away with it. Remember when we talked about the university admissions scandal? Parents, and it was the parents, not the kids, parents faked college applications, doctoring photographs, and making up awards and accomplishments, all trying to make their kids look more impressive than they were. Eventually, the scandal came to light, and the parents were punished. They did not get away with it. Not those famous parents who went to jail or paid fines. But who are we kidding? We know that many parents did get away with that exact same thing. We just don't know their names. How about a less serious example? Kids try to get away with things all the time. Kids try to get away with not studying, not doing homework. Strict parents don't let their kids get away with anything. Those strict parents enforce all the rules. Lenient parents might let their kids get away with more. Did you get away with a lot as a kid? Could you fake an illness, for example, and skip school? So that's the most common way to use get away with, to do something wrong and escape punishment. But there is a softer way to use this. You can say get away with to mean that there would not be serious consequences to doing something, and it doesn't have to be something morally wrong. In conversation, many people are uncomfortable adding extra intonation to their voices. They're worried that they'll sound less authentic if they appear to be adding too much emotion to their voices. But the truth is, you can get away with adding more emotion than you think you can. When I say that, What I mean is, you can add more intonation to your voice without suffering any consequences. Your conversation partner won't be bothered by more intonation in your voice. You won't suffer any consequences by adding more intonation to your voice. And notice, we're not talking about matters of right and wrong. Here's another example. If you're trying to lose weight, you might be counting your calories. You might be faithfully eating in that calorie deficit day in and day out, hopefully seeing results on the scale. But you can get away with a few indulgences here or there. Once every couple of weeks, you can probably get away with eating more than your planned calories. Not too much more, but a little more. It can help emotionally, and it won't hurt you in the long run. You can get away with making an exception every few weeks. At work, we make proposals for new business. When we're trying to win a project with a brand new client, we'll make big, fancy proposals with great pictures and graphics and stuff. But if we're proposing to do a project with a client that already knows us, we can get away with just a few pages. We don't need all the pictures and graphics. We can get away with something a little simpler. We can get away with it. We won't suffer any negative consequences. If a client knows us, likes us, and trusts us, they're not going to reject us just because we didn't have a beautiful proposal document. In those cases, we can get away with something a bit simpler. Again, this is not a question of right and wrong. It's about finding the right level of effort without suffering consequences. If I'm ever really tired, would you guys let me get away with repeating a lesson? Like, you wake up on a Thursday and there's a lesson about why Zoom video calls are so tiring. And you think to yourself, wait a minute, wait just a minute. I think I've heard that before. I don't think you'd let me get away with that. I wouldn't even try to get away with that. But there are some things I can get away with. If I'm feeling lazy, I might just pick a topic that doesn't require any research. I've got a few in the back of my mind for the future. Every once in a while, I can get away with writing a lesson from memory or about my own experiences. JR's Song of the Week is a version of the Donna Summer song Hot Stuff, but this version is by the DJ Kygo. Now there's a combination I didn't see coming. Kygo is a house music DJ, and Donna Summer was the queen of disco. It's a good version. So Hot Stuff by Donna Summer, the Kygo version. And that's all for the audio portion of today's lesson. Remember, we also have the video lesson online at plainenglish.com/339. You know, I try to make the video lessons about the most useful way to use the language. And often, those video lessons are hard. We're talking about logic, probabilities, comparisons, things like that. But just today, I think we can get away with an easy one. Today's video lesson is about how to express surprise in a sentence. If you can't express surprise with your smile, then you can use this phrase. It's a really easy one, so if you watch those video lessons, today's almost like a day off. But still watch it, but it's not too hard. We can get away with an easy one every now and then, right? All right, that's all. We'll be back on Monday with a new lesson like always.